Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card uses this cute little set by Neat and Tangled called Maple Thanks. And I'm also using this Petal Burst embossing folder by Stampin' Up. So I'm going to start by inking up my leaf stamp with some Versamark ink, and I'm stamping it onto some Canson XL mixed media paper. It's kind of a thin paper and it takes watercolor really well. I'm going to sprinkle it with some white embossing powder so that I could see where I've stamped so that I can stamp the next one. I'm just going to get these leaves as close as possible. I'll put the powder on this second one so I can see that one, and then I'll stamp the final one. I've cut this paper a little bit longer and wider than I need, and I'm just going to trim it out when I'm done. All right, so now I'm going to heat set this and I'm ready for watercolor. I'm using Scattered Straw, Spice Marmalade, Forest Moss, and Festive Berries. And what I'm going to do is just color these leaves in randomly with the brush tip of these markers. I started with the color that I wanted to be the most prominent, which is the Festive Berries. And now I'm going in with the one that I wanted to see the next most prominently, which is the Forest Moss. And you can see I'm coloring in not just segments, full segments, but partial segments. By putting multiple colors into each segment, that I'm forcing them to blend with each other once I put the water on. All right, so I'm finishing up here with some Scattered Straw, just filling in any empty holes I have. I'm using the number 4 brush from this Ranger set of brushes, and I have my jar of water here, and I'm just going to get some water on my brush and tap it in. I'm not going to brush at all. I'm just tapping the water in, and I'm letting the colors blend on their own within each one of these segments. Now, if you brush, then it'll become all muddied and you won't be able to see the individual colors. But just by tapping the water in, it'll blend whatever colors are in each segment, and some of them will be solid, some of them will be mixed, and you'll get a nice variety of colors, so you'll be able to see all the colors, yet they won't be too blended in. This is such an easy technique because there's no thinking involved. All the coloring that I did at the beginning was all just really random. And now it's just a matter of putting the water in. You do want to make sure that you get water all the way to the edge of all these different compartments, because you want your color to go all the way to the edge of the image. It's also helpful to continually refresh your brush with water. So you can see I keep going back to my water to get rid of whatever color is on my brush, because if you just keep tapping and tapping, you're gonna, take the color from one segment to the next segment, and then they'll all get mixed together. After I was done tapping in the water, I noticed there were some areas that had a little bit too much water. So I took a tissue and I just sort of dried off my brush here, and now I'm soaking up the excess water just really carefully. And what this does is it'll take away the excess water without removing too much of the color. If you use your tissue directly to the cardstock, it'll pull up a lot more of the color than when you're using this dryish brush. All right, I'm going to speed through the rest of this coloring. I'm doing the other 2 leaves the same exact way I did the first one. I'll turn off the music and I'll be back in just a minute. That completes the coloring of the leaves. Before I move to the next step, I'm going to let this dry completely. I'm going to use gathered twigs to create the background behind the leaves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to color right around the edge of the leaf, just kind of a thick-ish line. The more color you put down, the darker your background will be. I'm just going to go all the way around my leaf here. You can see I'm being kind of messy with it. And then I'll take a brush with some water on it, and I'm going to start in the white area. I'm going to push my brush toward the edge of the leaf and then pull the color back out. And this is going to soften that line on the outside of the leaf, but it's not going to completely remove it, so it's going to sort of look like a shadow. And this is meant to be sort of messy and watercolory, sort of lots of water staining, and that's all good with me. So I'm using a lot of water. I'm just pushing it around randomly. And you can see when I get to this spot here, I realize I really needed to do the outlining of the second leaf down because I don't want it to get wet. It's a lot harder to apply the marker when the cardstock is wet. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more of that second leaf and just spread the water around. I decided to color the background this brownish color because I wanted the edge, because it's a white embossed image, to really get that white edge to pop out. You could put a darker background. You could leave it white and it'll be kind of a nice, clean and simple look, but I wanted to really make these leaves pop. Now after I was done, I wished I would have made my outline thicker around the leaves to get a little bit more of a darker outline, but no big deal. I just put some of my gathered twigs on my craft mat and I'm just dipping my brush into the water, pulling up some of the color and just applying a little bit more. So you can see it's getting a little bit darker, and this is going to make my leaves pop even more because I've got the darker background against that white outline. All right, I'm going to let that dry and work on my sentiment. I'm just going to stamp it with some Versamark ink on some early espresso cardstock, and I'm going to sprinkle it with some white embossing powder and heat it to set it. And then I just trim the bottom, and now I'm going to make an angle out of the left side. So I'm going to mark the halfway mark vertically, and that's a ½ inch. And then I'm going to come down where the sentiment starts, and I'm going to mark the left side and the right side, so the top and the bottom of the sentiment. And then I'm going to take a scissor and I'm going to connect all these dots together. And the reason why I did sort of a reverse banner here is because the leaves had a lot of these geometric triangles in it, and I wanted to tie that into the sentiment. For the rest of the background, I'm going to dry emboss with the Petal Burst embossing folder. And then I'm going to take some white, my white Gonzai palette, and I'm going to mix it up with some water so that it's pretty thick. I don't want it to be thin. The thicker it is, the more you'll be able to see the splatter on the leaves. And I'm just going to tap it. And the thicker it is, the smaller the dots will be. But when they do drop, they won't kind of absorb into the cardstock if it's thick. So I'm going to try to make this pretty thick and drop some small splatters here of white. And that'll complete my leaf panel. You can see how this looks with the white splatters. I really like that little touch it adds. Now I'm going to mat this piece onto some early espresso cardstock, and this Canson XL paper is really thin, and so it easily mats and unwarps as you adhere it to other pieces of cardstock. Anyway, I had some issues with the length of my cardstock. It was a little bit too long, but I'm going to just use my ATG tape runner to adhere all these pieces together. Now I've got it on my card base, and now it's a little too short, so now I'm going to cut the card base. No big deal here. For my sentiment, I'm just going to put some Scotch foam tape on it and adhere it right there to the top so it's not covering too much of the leaves, and then I'll just cut off the excess with a scissor. And that completes the card for today. I figured I should probably get a fall card in quickly before winter gets here. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.